Hello, all out there. This is John Gray in Albany, New York, and this is Open Book. If you've just stumbled on this segment, we try to once a week, if we can. We find an author from anywhere in the country. Actually, you could be in Spain if you want to be. I don't care. I like to talk to authors. In addition to being a journalist for 40 years, I do writing on the side, a lot of writing, and so I like to talk to authors about their books and help them get them out there and get more publicity for them, and also about the process and what goes into it and how'd you become an author and all that good stuff. And we don't have any rules in terms of I've talked to children's book authors. I've talked to guys who've written fiction on John F. Kennedy or serious books about Kennedy, historical books. Also lots of fiction, fun stories like that. So that's the fun thing about this. It's a wide open tent. If you write a book, we're happy to have you on. I don't know if I can do a cookbook, but we'll have to see. That might be a tricky one. But I want to bring in our guest right now. We have Karin Lin-Greenberg. She has written a book called You Are Here, and I've got my copy right here. And I have to admit, before as we bring Karin in, that this one has even more interest to me because I'm doing the research on the author of the week, and I'm like, wait a second, she's teaching at Siena College, or Siena University now we're calling it. Is that correct, Karin?
Right. Siena University as of this past summer.
And what do you teach there?
I teach creative writing, so I'm very fortunate to get to teach what I like to do.
Probably a dumb question because if you said calculus, I would have been shocked,
Right.
So before we get to the book, I want to talk about you a little bit. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in New Jersey, in northern New Jersey. So I was there until college, and then went to college outside of Philadelphia, and then went to Pittsburgh for grad school, and then knew I wanted to teach and just kind of had to take whatever teaching jobs I could find. So ended up in Missouri for a few years, then in Ohio for a few years, and then North Carolina. And I was so excited when the job at Siena came up because I could come back to the Northeast. So I've been here since 2012.
Okay, so you've been at Siena for that long?
Yeah.
Up here? Wow. Good for you. And you're teaching, is it just creative writing or is it a variety of English classes you teach?
So I mostly teach creative writing. I have taught a little bit of literature, a little bit of comp rhet, but for the most part, I'm really lucky that students are interested in creative writing. So we've been able to fortunately fill the classes. And so I teach creative writing in all genres, teach poetry, fiction, nonfiction.
I'm happy to hear that people still take those courses because I gravitated toward them when I was young and in school, in LaSalle, in high school, and in my college days at Hudson Valley Community College and SUNY Oswego. Because now, and I'm seeing it all the time, where with ChatGPT and these different AI apps, you can spit gobbledygook down that's not very, we'll call it good writing, and then just hit a button and it rearranges it for you. My only issue, Karin, is I feel like it's not authentic. It's not their true voice. And also, if you read enough of it, you start to recognize the AI in it, if that makes sense. So I'm happy to see there's students out there who still want to learn to write. That's great. So you go to college. You want to be a teacher. Were you always writing on the side, even like as a young girl, like in high school?
I was. I actually didn't know I was going to be a teacher. I knew I wanted to do something creative, but as you know, creative work sometimes doesn't support your life. So you have to figure out sort of a practical path as well. So as a kid, I was really interested in both art and writing. I thought maybe I'd make comics. I did a lot of that, when I was in high school, college for the school newspapers. But yeah, I was always writing stories, took writing classes in college. I did an English major with a writing minor, and just kept pursuing it, kept taking classes, went to grad school for it, and then figured out, maybe if I find a teaching job, I can, talk to young people about the stuff that I was so enthusiastic about. So yeah, very lucky to have gone down that path.
Now, once you started teaching, were you starting to get more serious about your own writing where you thought maybe I should try to put this out there? I think every single writer I've talked to so far, and I've done about a half dozen of these, they didn't just say one day I'm going to write a book and they wrote a book. They were writing. It could be anything. It could be short essays from a regional magazine or, columns in a newspaper. It's almost like a muscle that you have to like work and work and work, that part of your brain to write. And was that you as well? Were you writing a lot of smaller things and trying to get them published and out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I was mostly writing short stories for years and years and years. A lot of that was actually because I was so busy with teaching. When I first started, I was teaching 4 classes a semester, all writing classes, so just tons and tons of grading. So just trying to figure out, what could I fit into my days. And so yeah, I was writing a lot of short stories. Some were, I think, okay, a lot of failed short stories, but I think I learned to write through some of those failures and was submitting them to literary journals. And so, yeah, for years and years and years, I wasn't thinking book. I was thinking, just these smaller pieces. How might I get these published? And then at a certain point, I had a lot of stories published. And then I started thinking about story collections. And my first book was actually a collection of stories, as was my second. So this was my first novel, but actually my third book
Hmm.
because I was, I think just writing so many stories while teaching.
Were these short stories published with a traditional publisher, or were you self-publishing? How were you getting them out there?
So the individual stories were all through literary journals. So, a lot of those are run through English departments at
Hmm.
colleges and universities, some in newspapers, some through winning contests. And then my first collection, I was very fortunate to win the Flannery O'Connor Award for Short Fiction, which is through the University of Georgia Press. And so they put out the book in hardcover and then a year later or 2 years later in paperback. So it was nice to be able to work with a press and have people do things like the cover and the
Hmm.
marketing and all that. I felt very very lucky to have won that
Was
award.
that Faulty Predictions? It was
That was
called.
faulty. Yeah, so that was the first book, and that happened. I won that the second year I was here at Siena, so that was a nice thing after getting this
I
job and
bet.
settling in. Yeah.
And is Faulty Predictions just an overall name for the collection, or was that one of the stories?
It's one of the stories, and it's about this character who was always just sort of thought she knew everything about her life and about the people around her, and came to see that a lot of the things that she thought were true or that were going to happen were faulty.
How do you come
And
up
I
with an
felt
idea?
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go.
no, I'm sorry. No,
I
I
was
thought
saying,
thematically it worked for the rest of the stories in the collection, so I thought let's
oh,
make that the
a
title.
perfect umbrella. Yeah. Where do you get it? Do you get a single idea and it grows? Like you water it a little bit, like a little acorn or something. Or I'm always interested when writers, or do you see something bigger than the one idea before you even start writing a story?
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way of putting it, that acorn, something really small. It might be just an image or something I hear, a snippet of something. It might even be, turn on the news and see a story and think like, oh, how about this person who's like standing in the side, who's not even like a main character in the story? What might their story be? So yeah, I think it's just very, very small things and then just asking questions and then seeing how they grow.
Yeah, I remember reading a long time ago the book on writing by Stephen King. I think every writer's
Mm.
read that book. And some of it I tell young writers, I'm just like, you don't have to take everything in like gospels. It's like anything. Some of it you go, yeah, he's going on and on about his childhood. I don't care about that stuff so much. But when he gets to the tools of writing, and I don't know if it was in that book or one of his things, he said it's almost like a writer sits at a fire in an opening in the woods. It's dark, and then these characters kind of come out of the wood line and walk over to warm themselves by the fire, and some you don't really know who they are, if they're going to just stay for a little bit and leave, or if you're going to say, "Well, that's really interesting." And then, do you find that when you're writing, where you get surprised, where you come up with an idea, and all of a sudden you go, "Oh, I really like this." They become bigger than you thought they were going to be.
I think so. I think when you're building scenes, when you're building even a novel, somebody who may have come in briefly in, an earlier page, you think, wait, this person might appear again, and something might happen with this character. So yeah, absolutely. I'm not a big planner, so I think I just kind of start with something small and then build from there.
Yeah, I think it's George R. R. Martin says he. Now, granted, I've said this to other authors. It's not one or the other, but he's not far off. He says you're either the architect or the gardener. The architect has to structure the whole story before he starts building it, and then the gardener kind of gets in there and just I'm going to put this here and put this there, and then gets surprised and everything else. I think the problem with the gardener, because I've done both ways, is you can get yourself in a little bit of trouble structurally, where you got to go back and fix stuff that you said, I didn't really plan this out. If I'm going to have this person be this in this chapter, I need a little back. I need to bring them in earlier so this makes sense. Do you find that too?
I think so. I think it's certainly easier to use that method for shorter things. But I think, yeah, when you are in a novel and then you discover this character who briefly appeared seems really important in chapter 12, you do have to go back. I agree and kind of figure out how to build that foundation for the character maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, well, nothing nothing turns itself more in a movie where it's a whodunit. You get to the last 20 minutes and they throw it on a character who had
Right.
nothing to do with this. You're like, well, they're just cheating now.
Right,
But
right.
all right, the book is called "You Are Here," Karin Lin-Greenberg. We're going to talk more about the actual novel itself when we come back after this short break. All right, welcome back. We're talking to author Karin Lin-Greenberg. The book is "You Are Here." Talk about this novel. This is the first novel. Was this going to be a short story that you just had so much going on? You said, "Wait, I can't do like 2,000, 4,000 words on this. It's got to be something much bigger."
Yeah, the first what's now the first chapter started out as a short story. So it was just I was thinking of it as just an independent short story, a standalone short story. And I submitted it to a contest that I've been submitting to for years called the Nelson Algren Award from the Chicago Tribune. And it ended up being a finalist and it ended up getting published in the Chicago Tribune. And that just gave me some confidence about that story. And I started thinking, could this be expanded? Could it become something more than a short story? And I started thinking about the characters and the place. And so it's about a mother and a son. The mother is a hairstylist in a salon, a hair salon in a shopping mall. And the protagonist of the first story is her 9-year-old son. And I started thinking, who else might these characters interact with in the
Hmm.
course of a day or a year in this mall? And I thought, maybe something has been set up here. Just kind of going back to what we were just talking about, you set these things up, you have these little details, and this is a place that's this mall is falling apart. It's kind of on its last legs. And I thought, what if we see who else would be affected by the closing of this mall? So yeah, it was started as a story, and then just I started thinking, what's already here? What could I build upon?
Was there a single idea that made you think of this? I mean, did you drive by? We've seen malls closing down, and it is kind of sad, especially if you go back to an area you grew up and you had great memories of going to the movies there or playing video games or just hanging out with your
Right.
friends on a Saturday. Was there something like that where why a mall? Because it brings people together?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just thinking about how malls have changed a lot in my lifetime. When I was a teenager, the malls were a place to go and hang out, and you didn't have to buy things. You could just be there and walk around and have fun. And then as an adult, it just they've become, just like I guess quieter places might be a nice way of saying it. People are buying things online a whole lot more. Malls are changing. People don't go buy things there. They go for the movies or maybe a restaurant there, but it's just very different. And when I moved here, the Latham Circle Mall was kind of on its last legs,
Hmm.
and I'd sometimes go just kind of walk around there because it was near where I lived, and I was just like, this is just a place you kind of walk around, right?
Sure.
There's a lot of places there are no sidewalks, so malls are a good place to walk around. And it was just interesting seeing the things, just the gates being pulled down and not going back up. And so yeah, I was just kind of thinking about how things change and how things that were once vibrant can die out. And I thought this could be an interesting overarching plot line for the book.
And do we follow this boy through the whole book, or does it sort of go off in different directions with other characters?
So there are 5 point of view characters, and he's one of them. His mother's another one of them. And so all the point of view characters are involved in the mall in some way. There's a young woman who works in the food court. There's the manager of the mall's bookstore. In the first story, there's a character who's introduced, who's a woman who's about 90 years old, who comes every week to get her hair styled. And the mall is like the one place where she comes for companionship. So it cycles through all these characters. They all have their own conflicts and problems in their lives, but then the problem overall for the book is the impending closing of the mall and what they'll do afterwards.
And how it's going to impact each of their lives?
How it's going to impact each of their lives. And these characters originally seem pretty separate, and you see that the stories end up getting kind of woven together. So I started it thinking that maybe it would be a connected story collection, but it ended up becoming more of a novel as I saw these lives intertwining more, and one life was sort of dependent on the other, narratively. So I think it started with one story, became a linked story collection, and then ultimately became a novel.
Did it surprise you where it went? Did you think you were going to go one way, and as you got into these characters and their voices, were you kind of like, oh, this would be interesting. I wasn't planning this, but now that I think now I'm sitting here, 35,000 words in, I kind of want to go in this direction.
Yeah, I didn't know where it was gonna go. I was just thinking, who are the characters, who might interact, and then like how might I put characters who are different together because of the space that brought them together. So it was a lot of fun to just figure out, how do you tell these independent stories where the characters are away from them all, and then how do you intertwine the stories? So yeah, I think especially the question of how do you bring these characters together for me, was really interesting thing to figure out as I was going through the book.
One of the things I ran into when I first started writing any kind of short stories, and especially when I got into books, was I had to be careful that I really got in the head of the characters as I was writing their dialogue and them, because I think part of us is in all characters a little bit, but you don't want to have somebody read and say, well, Sarah's a lot like Claire, you know what I mean? And because you can get too heavy-handed and too similar. You really want to separate. Was that a challenge for you, going from a boy to an older woman to, or do you almost have backstories in your head that you reference and think about before you start writing that character?
For me, that's the really fun challenge of writing fiction. For me, it was a goal to have all these characters not be anything like me and to try to figure them out. And I think my experience writing short stories really helped with that because I think, each story you start with a new character and you kind of have to figure them out. So yeah, that for me was really fun. I'm trying to work on a novel now that follows one character for over 300 pages, and to me that's more of a challenge, just sticking with one person as
Sure.
opposed to having a chance to just start over again and play with a new character. So yeah, it was a lot of fun figuring them out.
Was word count ever an issue for you? I know it usually is. Especially if I'm enjoying what I'm writing, it could be a short story or a book. I try to like not think about word count, but then I get, I'm like, I write a little thing for Capital Region Living Magazine, which is the thing outside of Albany, if people are watching it.
Yeah.
And it used to be like 1,500, then it was like 12. Now they got me down to like 600 words, and I'm like, good God, it's like a postage stamp. I try to write it, and I'm always like over, and I got to go back and try to trim. Do you find that even with a novel where you just sort of let it go, and then you realize I got to really tighten this up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, coming from writing stories, writing a novel felt like I suddenly had all this freedom. I have all these pages, I can write as much as I want. But, I think nobody wants to read a like 800 page first novel, right?
No.
So I ended up trimming back as much as I could, and then I got it down to about 360 pages. And then the editor who bought this book edited out over 50 pages, and not significant plot points or anything like that, but just places where my prose could be tighter. I think it was a really good editor for me, and just found these like moments where maybe there's a repetition or just extra words, and it added up to 50 pages. It's kind of amazing.
It is, but you're smiling about it. But I tell people it's a hard day when that email shows up,
Yeah.
and with the notes and for the, I don't want to it's cliche to say you got to have a thick skin. It's more than that because you really do pour a lot of your heart into these things, and you have to approach it almost like, okay, I got to be a professional here. Like this is an outside
Right.
voice. They're looking through this, and they want this a little bit changed, or they think this is too much of whatever. How do you do you work with the same? Well, this is your first novel. In terms of that, that relationship with the editor's got to be good because you can't take it personally. And I found I worked with two different editors in my last book, and the second one especially, I had to pick my battles and push back a little bit, but not. I was like, I try to remember they're here to help me. They're not here to, this isn't fifth grade where the teacher's writing big red marks on the margins. It's they're trying to help this book get better, and so I got to take it in that spirit.
Yeah, I think that's always the thing I try to remember. I think I think I was fortunate to have been able to take so many writing classes as a student when I was younger. And so I was just very used to getting feedback on work and then thinking about, is this valuable feedback? And that's the same thing I tell my students. I say, it's a thing to be grateful for that somebody's looking at your work and they're taking it seriously and they're spending time with it and they're marking it up, So I just try to think that same way and think, you know, does this make it better? Does it make it clearer to a reader? And I think, 99% of the time it does. I think if you're working with an editor who sees the same vision that you do. But I agree, there's also that, the 1% or however many percent where you need to push back a little bit and say, like, I think this needs to stay. And there were moments in this book where I said, you cut this out, but I think this scene really would be useful
Sure.
to keep in. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the clock. We got to take a second break. Back with our final segment with our author, Karin Lin-Greenberg. And the book is You Are Here. And we're glad you were here watching this interview. Right back after this. It's funny as we come back on. I was thinking, those notes you get from an editor. I think it's the movie Whiplash, where if you ever saw that movie about the music teacher, who's awful, by the way, but when he's talking to the kid in it, Miles Teller, I think the actor is. He says what's some of the worst advice a teacher can give is good job or that's fine or I remember when I was young, I had a teacher named David Kissick at LaSalle who he praised my writing, but he was harder on me, I thought, than the other students. And at the time when you're 14 or 15, you can get annoyed and say, well, I wrote better than this essay better than that kid, and he should wrote good job, but mine I got all these. And you have to realize that somebody's trying to help you, and almost like to your side, someone took the time to look at your book, and the fact that they're invested in it to say, I love this book, but let's fix this or that, and you have to be prepared for that stuff, right?
I think so. I think, that's what I tell my students, if you want to do this, you have to be willing to listen to what other people are saying. And I think, and I think editors are doing it with a spirit of trying to make the book better. As you know, there's once you publish a book, there's lots of feedback coming from all corners, and some people are not as kind and generous as a good editor, right? And so, I mean, for me, I appreciate it and then try to tune out like the noise that's not as useful. So yeah, I'm always grateful for good feedback, for helpful feedback.
I got the best advice from a guy named Doug Delisle. He was an arts editor at the Troy Record newspaper a million years ago. He hired me to write a column, and when I first splashed, I was getting some nice people could call in the paper and write little editor in the paper, and people could, oh, this new guy's great, and I'm like, I just see the comments, and he said, listen to me. He said, if you're going to read all the good stuff, you got to read all the bad stuff and give them both equal weight. My advice is don't read any of it if you can help it, because you lose your mind.
That's very good advice.
Do you find too? I'm guessing the answer to this is yes. I was watching an interview with Stallone recently, Sylvester Stallone, talking about Rocky right out of the gate, and he was like, "What are you talking about right out of the gate?" People don't realize he had been writing scripts. I mean, he said he's probably got 100 scripts in drawers that will never see the light of day. Some of them probably pretty good. Some of them absolutely awful. You've probably written things that never got published, right? That because people, it's one of those things. It's hard to explain. People say, "Well, I want to write." I'm like, "Well, then write." But understand, you might just write it for you. You have to be okay looking at a little short story or a poem and saying, "Yeah, this may never get published in the local paper or something, or in a big magazine or something." But I kind of like that. And do you feel the same way? Sometimes you have to write for you first.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also, one thing that I always think about too with stuff that ultimately ends up not being published is sometimes it takes that unpublished piece to get to the published piece. Sometimes you learn something about writing by doing that, or you figure something out, and then you can do it better in the next piece. So yeah, I mean, I think what's always really important and what you don't see when you have a nicely, packaged book is just all the rejections, all the things behind that. So yeah, I think it's always important for writers to talk about that.
Do you find yourself repurposing things? Like, let's say you write something, you like it, but didn't go anywhere, but you love something in there and you sort of never forget about it. And maybe 5 years later, you're writing a totally different story. And you think, you know what? It's almost like the guy who goes to the woodshed, who saves everything and starts opening drawers going, I knew I'd use that sprocket someday, and they take it down. Do you find that as well?
I almost never do, but I save everything. So I'll save like a draft of like, I'll have like version one, version two, version three, and I save it so that way I feel like I can be, a brutal editor for myself because I say, oh, I can go back and save that, and then I don't. But it's nice to have it, nice to have those things all collected together.
Do you have a writing process where you write in the morning versus night versus whatever, or how do you do it?
I really don't. I think I just write when I find the time. So I mean, I tend to write a lot during breaks from teaching, and then I'll edit during the school year. But I try to generate as much as I can over the summers and then winter breaks.
Do you try to write through in terms of chapter, 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 or do you like write a chapter and then spend the next few days really editing that chapter before you want to move on? Because people are different. Some people like to really get things fixed before they move on. Others just want to keep the wheels turning.
I tend to do a lot of revision, so I will do like a couple rounds of revision before I go on to the next chapter so that things are, in a state that I feel is okay, but it's not done. I want to get to the end of the book and then go back and then revise again and again and again. So, some revision along the way, but also slowing down and doing tons after the whole book is done.
If you went back and read stuff that you wrote 10 years ago, would you enjoy it, or would you like lose your mind and want to fix it and go, hey, that was sloppy. That was you know what? I would have. Oh, what was I thinking that day? This could have been better.
Yeah, I very rarely go back and revisit older things. Even this book, it was published in 2023, but I wrote the first draft in 2018 to 2019. So now when I look at it, I think like this feels like very different from what I'm doing now. So I mean, I think most writers feel that way. I mean, I think you kind of look back and which is good. I think it just means that you've progressed as a writer. So I think that's okay.
Absolutely. I was looking. This book got a lot of great praise. I mean, that must have felt good to see the different national publications. I saw a mention of Oprah in there, which is like always a seal of approval if you can get that. Talk about that a little bit. Was that just your publisher pushing it out, and you got good response?
Yeah, I think I was just really lucky. I think there's a really, really great marketing and publicity team from my publisher, which is Counterpoint Press. And I think got it into lots of hands and people read it. And I was very fortunate that they had nice things to say about it. So very grateful for that too.
And I'm guessing now, even if this became a monster, the next whatever, the next Grisham book, would you still want to teach, or would you like to just write all the time if you could, or do you like that balance?
I really love teaching. I love being in the classroom with students. I'm actually on sabbatical this year, and I do miss teaching, but then there's a lot that I don't miss. I don't miss the meetings. I don't miss,
Yeah.
some of the paperwork and stuff. So I think if I had a huge hit, I would love to teach a little bit, but not as much. So, but it's so nice to be in the classroom with young people who want to do this thing that, we get to do.
And hey, you might discover the next whatever,
Yeah, that's so
especially.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time here. Where can people get the book if they want to check it out, Karen?
They should be able to pick it up anywhere books are sold online. I think bookshop.org is always a really good place to go. I know they have it at the Book House in
Yep.
Stuyvesant Plaza, at Northshire in Saratoga. So yeah, I think local places have it and online as well. Thank you.
Amazon, I'm sure Amazon seems to have everything.
Yeah, it should
They
be there.
carry it as well. Well, listen, congratulations on the book and all the stories. And I'm
Thank
going to
you.
have to track down faulty predictions because I love short stories. Some of the best things because they're quick. Some of them you love, some of them you're like, but you move right on and
Got another one.
you're not investing all this time where you go, well, it was okay, but I thought it would do this and it did that. And. But short stories are great that way. And it's a real challenge if you've never written one. You've written a bunch of them. You've got to get their attention, move quickly, make that turn, whatever the turn's going to be in the story, and then get out of there before they realize, you don't know what you're doing,
Yeah.
But Karin Lin-Greenberg, thanks so much for doing this interview today. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks so much for talking to me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. That is it for us here on Open Book. I'm John Gray up in Albany. Wherever you're watching us, we appreciate you being here. And as I always say at the end of these, please keep reading.